try to ask us to do one, especially if it's a hard cannulation. And because most of us can do ultrasound guided cannulation, we just do that.
Bongga talaga dito, 'di ba, ultrasound guided
Uh,
pa, 'di ba? Sa atin pakiramdaman lang kung
Ultrasound.
nasaan na ba yung operasyon.
As
Parang nandito
in.
yata.
My heart goes sha la 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 la, sha la la in the morning.
Kia ora, welcome to Biyaheng New Zealand. I'm your host, Binibining Veronica. My guest tonight is an ICU outreach nurse in New Zealand. The goals of ICU outreach team include prevention of unplanned or preventable admissions to ICUs, continued support for discharged patients from intensive care services, and the education of ward staff through the sharing of critical care skills and knowledge appropriate to ward situations.
Hi, I'm Rainbow Enjambre, and I'm from Cebu City. I moved to New Zealand back in 2008.
And actually, Rainbow and I are working in the same hospital. However, the first time I saw her was in a video.
Yeah, it was a TikTok video.
Was it difficult to prepare? Parang i-coordinate yung mga dancers.
My God, it took me 5 days just to get that content. Just because we have, a lot of people working shift work.
Yeah, yeah.
So, mahirap ano sila together. So, that's why clips lang siya.
Please tell us about your journey to New Zealand.
I guess it was already instilled in my mind that I was gonna work abroad after I graduate. And I actually already had plans to go to the States, but recession happened, and so I was gonna wait for a while to get a visa. So I came to know about New Zealand actually through a couple of my closest friends who lived in Wellington then, and yeah, and they've convinced me to start the process, and with the help of an agency. So back then it was still quite easy to get a slot to get the to go through the competency assessment program.
Yeah.
So some of the schools here offer either 4 or 6 week program, and I got the 4 week program through Wairiki, which is now called Toyohamai in Rotorua. So after the 4 weeks of competency assessment program, I applied to be registered, and then I got my practicing certificate after 3 months. Yeah, and so during that time, I was pretty much applying everywhere for a job.
Oh, and then before you arrive here in New Zealand, did you have to take an English language exam as well?
Yeah, so you have to take the either I think it's still the IELTS
Yeah.
and exam, and then you have to have at least 7 in all of the like the speaking, writing, and listening skills. Yeah,
So you took the IELTS for the English language exam.
yeah.
Madali lang for you. Was it easy? Parang kaya ko to, walang review.
No. Actually,
Every day.
nag-review talaga ako. Nag-review ako for a month before taking the exam. And then prior to that, I was just watching lots of Harry Potter movies.
Oh, yun pala ang
Just because
secret.
just because of the accent. And
Yeah.
that's what they told us to do anyway. So yeah.
Oh. See guys, tips. Mahal kayo ng Harry Potter. Di ba? Nag-enjoy na kayo,
Harry Potter
nakapractice.
lang, oh, 'di ba? Oh.
What was your first impression of New Zealand?
So, I came to New Zealand middle of winter. So it was in June. And then straight away, we traveled to Rotorua, which is a really small town. And it was like 6 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
So
Ang dilim na
I
nun.
thought it was,
So dark.
so I thought it was like a ghost town. All the shops are closed. So at 5 o'clock, wala nang shops na open. Okay, so hindi ka mag-expect na open yung mga shops. I think because they value family time. So yeah. So yeah, I thought it was a ghost town, and then a year into the country, I've come to realize how friendly and accepting the Kiwis are, and you've come to appreciate nature in a whole new way. Talaga, it's like, yeah, it's on steroids here in New Zealand. Nature.
Yeah. Parang simple life na every time you wake up in the morning, parang postcard beauty, effortless, effortless,
Yeah,
effortless. You don't have to travel so
definitely.
far. No, kahit walang filter, ang gaganda na, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially in the South Island, it's also a very different place.
What is it like working as an ICU outreach nurse?
I've actually been working in Rotorua Hospital since 2008. Yeah, it's been like 12 years actually.
Wow.
I I initially wanted to go to Wellington because that's where the couple of my friends were living, but I got a better job offer here in intensive care, so I wanted to continue with that pretty much. And a couple of years ago, I started as a ICU, one of the ICU outreach nurses in the hospital. So we follow up on patients that have been discharged from our from ICU and onto the wards, and then we also give support to the staff that have got patients that are deteriorating. It's an afternoon shift role, so it's from 3 to 11 only. We would really like for it to be morning, afternoon, and night, um, but anyway, the it's we go to the different wards, and then we that's where we offer support to the staff nurses. It's different to my role as a staff nurse in intensive care because you're stuck in the
Yeah,
unit.
yeah, yeah.
But as an ICU outreach nurse, you have to go around the hospital and make sure that they don't have anyone that's deteriorating.
So how many outreach nurses are there in a shift? Is it just yourself or do you have like a team
Uh,
of people?
yeah, so there's currently there's 5 of us, but there's only one each shift.
Do you enjoy working as a resource, as an outreach nurse? Or is it
As an
stressful? Because you don't
outreach,
know what, yeah, because you don't know what
um,
to expect.
If you enjoy watching this video, please click like and subscribe. Salamat po!
yeah, it can be quite stressful. But what I like about it is you actually get to know the nurses in the ward. It's a different type of nursing, and I feel like, yeah, sometimes it gets a bit, it's not boring, but yeah, it feels a bit boring when you're just stuck in ICU or CCU. But when you go to the ward, you appreciate what they do in the ward, in the ward, and how many, how many patients they've got in a shift. They still manage to, take care all of their patients. So yeah, that's what I think I like about it, and you get to know a lot of the nurses, which I really like.
So I think you've touched on the pros of your role. Now, what are the cons naman for you?
Cons, yeah, aside from being, it can be quite stressful, and sometimes it's hard when you've um, established that rapport with the patient and you've bonded with that patient, and then they don't do well. So it's sort of like, you have to try and step back, and yeah, it's hard because last time, like last shift that I worked in, the patient didn't really do well, and I thought I had a bond with that patient. So it's really hard when you see a patient dying because it feels like it's one of your family members. So yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, and then also there's also higher chance of exposure to other infections, especially now na may COVID na. So we have to be extra careful in using our PPE, and we're quite lucky here in New Zealand that the numbers are really low, and that we are given the right amount of the right PPE to take care of our patients safely.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if you've noticed any difference now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Were there any difference in protocol at work?
Yeah. So at level 4, definitely there was no visitors. So the hospital was quite was very quiet. It wasn't good for the patients, but it was necessary. And also in ICU, it was mostly in preparation for an influx of patients, but we didn't get to that point, which is good. But other than that, it was actually quite quiet because there was no elective surgeries. Everything had to be canceled except for the cancer surgeries. But yeah, I think that's the only sort of difference that I've seen anyway.
What are your main tasks as an ICU outreach nurse?
Yeah, so assess patients usually yung mga may low blood pressure. Um, if Yeah, assessment of patients, and then the second would be those that have been discharged from ICU, because you have to make sure na that transition from having sort of an intensive care unit from intensive care unit, it's quite different when you go to the ward. So
Yeah.
they don't see the nurses all the time. So we have to make sure that they understand that process, and that they are sort of well enough that they don't have to see the nurse all the time. And the third one would be, yeah, they will ask us to do a few cannulations. It's actually not our job, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's the doctor's job, but they try to ask us to do one, especially if it's a hard cannulation. And because most of us can do ultrasound guided cannulation, we just do that. We just do them. Yeah.
Bongga talaga dito, 'di ba, ultrasound guided
Oh,
pa, 'di ba? Sa atin pakiramdaman na
ultrasound.
nasaan na ba yung epekto. 'Cause have you worked in the
Yeah,
Philippines then
definitely.
before moving here?
Yeah, I worked in Perpetual Soccer Hospital. So I did 3 months on probation on probation in the ward, and then I transferred to ICU after 3 months. So maybe ICU experience about a year and 7 months. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to continue with ICU.
ICU ka talaga 'no, through and through 'no? Nakakatuwa. I'm so
Oh,
proud of you, wala lang. Parang ang galing nga nung story mo ba na parang nai-continue mo 'cause not everyone na gano'n yung journey na naituloy talaga nila 'no, and it seems like you really enjoy what you're doing.
yeah, yeah. I was really lucky na I got the job here in Rotorua, because I wasn't planning to stay in Rotorua. And I remember I went for an interview in Wellington, and it was in a medical ward. and and I think that time grabe ka busy yung ward. Tapos tinutour pa niya ako sa ward. Sabi ko, I don't think I can work here. Kasi I think my time management skills are really crappy.
Hindi
If
naman.
you don't work in the ward,
Hmm.
kasi ang ICU kasi, if usually you have one or two patients. So you really focused on that patient. I know that they're really sick, but when you work in the other ward, you've got five other patients, and I'm amazed by how the ward nurses can juggle those tasks, and I don't think I can do that not
Shout out
anymore.
sa
I
lahat
don't
ng
think.
mga ward nurses natin diyan siyempre, 'di
As
ba?
in, they work really hard.
'Di ba?
I
No,
could
kung
tell.
papasabay mo 5, 6 patients, sasagot pa ng telepono, tapos may orderly pa.
And yeah, yeah.
Ay naku, anyway. Tsaka siyempre, ICU nurses din. Shout out din sa inyong lahat naman. Talagang skills-wise, 'di ba?
Question of the day. Given the opportunity, would you rather work in ICU or in a medical surgical ward? Let me know in the comment section below. What tips can you share to other nurses wanting to work in New Zealand?
Um, payo ko lang is that yung process can be quite long. So I think while waiting for that, try and gain some experience, because I think it really matters when you try and search for a job here. And you also you also have to be open-minded and try to embrace the culture of the country that you're moving into. And what else? Specifically in intensive care unit or other specialized unit, the learning curve can be quite high, so it can feel quite overwhelming. But I think here in New Zealand, they are very supportive, and they've got this sort of orientation phase. So if you don't feel like you're safe enough to work on your own, you can always ask your manager to extend it if you want. Yeah, and just be grounded, I think. Yeah.
No, totoo yun. Attitude matters pa din talaga,
Mm.
no?
Was it worth moving to New Zealand? What makes it worth it?
Uh, yes, definitely. It's uh, and it's not just because I'm well compensated. It's because also I feel safe working and living here. Um, I feel like I'm, you know, I, I feel like I'm much more appreciated of what I do, and the respect that I get from colleagues, patients um is really nice. And it's the same level of respect that you would get with other healthcare team members, if it may be a doctor or physiotherapist or whatever. You get the same level of respect. And also what I like about here is there is a work life balance. Especially here in Rotorua, it's a very laid back. So even if it's stressful at work, you always have time to unwind. You go to the redwoods, go for a walk. Yeah, so it's worth it. So if you enjoy watching this video, please like and subscribe.